Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where we connect faith with fishing. Man, we got a great show for you today. I have got all the way from Lake Havasu, Arizona, uh, one bass U.S. Open champion, Roy Hawk. The Hawk is going to be on the podcast today, and I'm so excited. You will never meet a nicer guy in your entire life. And he is a straight up hammer with a fishing rod in his hand. And so, coming up on the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, Roy Hawk, all the way from Arizona. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast, where faith and fishing hook up. I have as my guest today, all the way from Lake Havasu, the
Oh,
Hawk. Roy Hawk is here today, man. Welcome, Roy. We're glad you're here.
thank you, brother. Good to be here and good to see you, man. It's been a little bit.
Man, I know, golly, we hadn't seen each other in a while. Back when you moved from the Elite Series to Major League Fishing, I was trying to do the chaplain for both tours, which was
Yeah.
killing me. It was absolutely killing me because both of those tours were head to head then, and I was flying back and forth and going on. And I told Mark Rose, I said, "Man, you got to handle this thing over here. I'm going to go back and just hang out with the young guys. The young guys don't know not to listen to me, and so I figured I had a better shot over there on the Elite Series. But man, this is awesome, man. You're fresh off of a big win, and congratulations, man. That was an awesome event. I
Thank
love following out west. I love west guys. I try to learn as much as I can because what I found is that the way you guys fish works where I fish, and not everybody fishes that way all the time. So, but hey, I want to ask you, tell me about your fishing journey. How did you get to be a pro angler? What was your fishing journey like?
The very first time I went fishing was when I was, 5 or 6 years old, and I still have a picture of it somewhere. I'm sitting on a bank in a pond with an actual stick, not even a bamboo rod, like a literal stick with string on it and a hook. And so that's where
Wow.
it actually started. And I actually have a picture of it, so it's pretty cool. That was a long time ago. And so anyway, that's how it started. And then I just kind of kept wanting to go fishing all the time. I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, and uh, my family for the most part lived back in Southern Illinois, Carbondale area. And so I'd go back in the summers and stuff, and then my dad would take me fishing back there, aunts, uncles, everybody would, that's all I wanted to do. It seemed like when I was younger. So they'd either let me free roam and take off and go fishing, go hit the creeks or ponds or lakes or whatever, or they would take me out in canoes or, every single one of them, like every person in my family, even great aunts, I had two great aunts that were amazing. They were both cat fishermen. That's all they wanted to do is catfish. And they fished totally separate ways. One of them was all bobber bait type of deal on suspended cats, and the other one was on the bottom every time. And they were both sisters, and they used to bicker about like the better technique of catfishing,
Oh, that's hilarious. Wow.
Yeah. So, uh, yeah, they just had a whole family that would take me, and that was the biggest thing. I think that's one thing that kids don't have these days in a lot of aspects is they don't have anybody to take them. They maybe get introduced to it and somebody takes them initially, but then after that, they don't have anybody else. And I was fortunate in that way to where the people around me didn't necessarily fish a lot, but I was so adamant about wanting to go fishing that they would take me. You know what I mean? That was
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
thing. They would either take me to a place and drop me off and let me just run around, or they would, actually go out in like a canoe with me or something like that and, paddle around and I would fish the whole time and they didn't even care about fishing. So that's definitely, how it got all instilled and it started to build in my heart, the love for it. And as time went on, I fished my very first tournament was an all species tournament. And I was it's hard to remember exactly, but I was probably like 12 or something like that. and I took out a canoe and just caught a bucket full of fish, because it was all species. They were trying to just gather up enough fish for a fish fry, and whoever had the heaviest amount of fish then won. And I was fortunate enough to win just by catching a bunch of bluegill and little catfish and some bass
Yeah.
and whatever. And I won some. They gave out two silver dollars that I still have. One's like a 1800, and the other one's like a low 1900.
Wow.
Of course, you had all the free drinks you could drink, So I got a
Yeah.
bunch of Pepsis. But that was so that kind of like triggered the kind of fishing tournament type of thing. Like I fished in like a little competition,
Right. Yeah.
versus just running banks. And from there, it seemed like I was probably 18 or so when I actually got in a bass boat. And my dad, they were having this little fundraiser tournament on Crab Orchard Lake in Southern Illinois. And my dad knew a guy, and that's how he found out about this tournament. And he's like, "Hey, my son's a pretty good fisherman. Could we get in the tournament?" He's like, "Yeah, you got a bass boat?" He's like, "No, I got a canoe." And he's like, "Well, yeah, sure, if you want." You know what I mean? It's no big deal. It's not like a big old tournament thing, and there's probably 15 boats in it, and kind of like a Wednesday nighter type of deal.
Yeah.
And guys were using it for a pre-fish for a bigger tournament, later on in the week. And so anyway, we pull up there to the ramp, and it is raining and blowing, and it's crazy. You know what I mean? My dad's like, "I ain't going out in no canoe." you know. I'm like, "Well, I'll go. I'll just go by myself or whatever." He's all, "Hang on." So he went and talked to his buddy, and his buddy was going out by himself. So anyway, I got put in that boat, and my dad got let off the hook there. And so that's the first ride in the bass boat. Hat flew off at blast off. I have no idea the whole deal. But yeah, we went out and caught some fish. I think we were third, and I got like the second biggest bass or something, throwing some rat traps down some bank or something. It was pretty cool.
That
But
is
that's
cool.
like my first kind of like tournament, that really fired me up. And he, that guy was talking to my dad. He's like, "Hey, you need to get this kid in a bass club. You got so he's connected. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't have any connection. I don't know anybody with bass boats. I don't. And so anyway, when I got home from vacation from Illinois and Utah, one of my friends, his dad worked for Browning Arms, and back then they had uh, what ended up being like Lew's and stuff like that later on. And so he his dad knew about a bass club, and so me and that guy, his name was Wiley Norton. In I think I was a junior. Yeah, I must have been a junior in high school. And anyway, we got in that club and got all hooked up and started fishing some tournaments with them, and I just loved it. It gave me a chance to get out on a bass boat and fish with different guys, and I just had a blast doing it. And but I always wanted to keep progressing and progressing, And so shortly after that, I started fishing some team tournaments, started fishing for the state team stuff. Um, that type of thing, and just kind of slowly progressed up. I never really had any money or anything like that, like I didn't have any resources behind me, I mean, I was raised by a single mother, and we didn't have a lot of money and whatnot, but I would do whatever it took to be able to get a new rod and reel. I'd do work, whatever, to try and garner up some tackle and whatever I could do. It seemed like, and I kind of just progressed that way through life. I had kids when I was real young. I was a senior in high school when I had my first son. So um, that made it hard, like trying to start out a pro fishing career. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To a
Yeah.
degree. But I always had that passion, and so all through from that period to about till I was in my 30s was just work anywhere I can work that I can feed my family, that will give me time off to allow me to go fish some tournaments,
Mm.
that type of thing. And I spent that whole, you know, 10, 12 years doing that, and that was my main focus was fishing. But, I had to work and so forth. And I didn't even have a bass boat,
Mm.
I didn't get a bass boat until that would be 2002. I
Okay.
was fishing
Yeah.
the U.S. Open in a borrowed boat, And back then they'd give out a boat to the single biggest bass caught. And I caught the single biggest
Oh,
bass.
wow.
I
Wow.
won my first boat, sold that boat, and bought a bigger boat. And so I had a fully rigged 2003, you know, 521 Ranger, and I was
Man.
like, here we go. And that next year, that fall, I won my very first pro tournament on actually on Lake Havasu. It was long before I
Mm.
lived here. Um, and so that kind of like, all right, I can do this. I can I can actually win a bigger tournament. I'd won some team tournaments and stuff prior to that, but uh, it really fired me up. It really
Mm.
fired me up. It gave me hope that one day maybe I could do it. Actually professionally. Quit my job type of thing. And from there till 2007, August 2007, coming up on anniversary, is the last time I had like a regular job.
Mm. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
That's,
then,
man, I'll tell you, you've risen to the top of the sport. I mean, you fished, you fished everything, you've won and competed on every level. One of the things I wanted to comment on about what you said is I hear this over and over. I'm approaching, I'm trying to get to like 100 podcasts or something like that, but I hear the same thing over and over again is that I had a parent that didn't necessarily fish all the time, or I had family members and they took me fishing. Man, how important is that? Kids' life, I meet a lot of men and they think, okay, well, I'm not a bass fisherman or I'm not, so I'm not going to get my kid into that. But I hear it over and over again in the lives of so many pros that, I had a family member, I had an aunt, I had an uncle, I had a dad, and they just let me do it. They just encouraged me to. They didn't want to do it. I'm talking to Brandon Card. He said his dad would sit in the back of the boat and not do anything at all and just watch him fish and stuff like that. And but that's awesome, man. That's awesome. So you had a couple of catfishing ants. Now, that's the first one I've heard
yeah,
about
one
that.
Aunt Betty, she just died. I think it was last year, and she was, like 90. Pretty cool.
Wow, wow. Man, I tell you that's amazing. It's so important to take your kids and to take any kids fishing. Like you said, getting them involved in the sport. That's pretty cool. One of the things that I've heard you say on past podcasts, you fish a lot of tournaments. I mean, you really do. And one of the things you fish the Wednesday nighter tournaments, man. You fish the fruit jar tournaments too. Man, the guys like flip out when you drive up to fish the fruit jar tournament. I mean.
Still whip on me. You know what I mean? I catch them some days I don't. And, I don't put a ton of emphasis in it. I do it more for just fun and because I love to fish and it gives me an opportunity to get other people from the community out and I fish with them. Guys, I fished with some of my friends that had never fished a tournament or hardly ever even bass fished, and I take them out
Right.
and kids, older guys. I mean, whoever wants to go type of thing. I do like a raffle type of thing
Right.
every year
Right.
with and I give away a fishing trip. And so a lot of times those guys will use their fishing trip with me and then we'll go fish like a Wednesday nighter. So you actually get a chance to fish a tournament, and get the whole feel of it.
I
So
will
that was
fly to Arizona if I can fish with you on a Wednesday night. I would
that was
love that, man. That would be awesome. That would be awesome. I'll bring one rod. That's it. Boom. That'll be all I do. That'd be
all
awesome.
right.
Well, Havasu, we went out to Havasu. It's been a number of years ago, but I was so blown away by that town and by the whole atmosphere out there. It's like you're riding along in the desert
Yep.
and bam, the most beautiful pool of water I've ever seen in my life comes up and then the London Bridge is at Havasu and all the history that goes with that. I don't think there's a prettier place on the planet than Lake Havasu. I love it out there. I really do.
It's a pretty cool place to live for sure. It's kind of like a beach town with no beach. You know what I mean? It's not,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, it is. It really is. I got to
type of,
ride with old Byron Velvick out there one time, and that was an adventure, riding with him. Back then they used to let me go as a marshal, and they'd even let me go and practice back then. I mean, they would let me go and ride with guys and build relationships and things like that. But I loved it out there at Havasu. Now, one of the things that I've noticed with you in podcasts, and really with anybody who's a follower of Christ, and first of all, I want to tell you this. I have never seen a more calm human being than Roy Hawk on as far as your tournament fishing goes, man. When you had a great tournament, you were the same way as you were when you had an awful tournament, or if you didn't, do well at all. And I've watched you on several podcasts, and I noticed, on this podcast, we embrace faith. I mean, it's about, it's not just about fishing, it's about faith. And
That's
and I noticed that you were doing one recently, and a lot of guys, they'll be interviewing you, and you'll start talking about your testimony, or you start talking about what God's doing in your life, and they just go, "Oh, that's good, man. Okay, let's move on to I didn't fish spinnerbait or something like that." But tell me how faith plays into your life, man. Tell me about a little bit about your faith journey.
Man, I'll tell. I mean, to me, it would be impossible to do what I do without it in my heart. It is. I go from. I mean, I just live on faith. 100% of the time. I don't know when my next check's coming. I don't know if I'm going to be able to make a truck payment or a boat payment, or I have no idea. I mean, I don't have a clue if I'm going to. I have no reserves, no nothing, just living on faith every day. Out
Mm.
here, and I basically don't ever have anything in my bank account. I mean, almost never.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so without the, I started the journey, kind of like fishing as a pro around 2007, probably around like 2005, six, somewhere in there. I was like, man, it was just on my heart constantly. Like, I got to get out of this. I gotta go fish. I have to go fish. I have to go fish. It was just pounding in my head. I couldn't figure out how to do it. I got no money. Like, what,
Yeah.
how am I going to do this type of thing? And, I ended up leaving that job with the old beat up Suburban and a pretty used boat, and took off and just went fishing.
Mm.
Basically no money, that type of a deal. When I fished the first time I went fished FLW tour, uh, I had enough money to get to the very first tournament. That's all I had, and I
Mm.
signed up for the tour.
Man.
you know, Deposits down, and had enough money to get to the Red River, very first one, and got down there, and they canceled the tournament because it was flooding. And I,
Wow.
man,
Wow.
now what?
Yeah.
So Perch, old Perch, he had, remember back when he had the big motorhome and all that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he says, "This is what you're going to do. I'm going to haul my motorhome over here to the next tournament, which was Table Rock, and you just live in it. I'm going to park it at an RV park, and you can just live in it until the tournament rolls around." It was two, three,
Wow.
four, something like that. So I just hid out in his trailer. I couldn't go practice because it was off limits, and you know,
Yeah.
it just kind of hung out in there. And the next, the tournament rolls around there at Table Rock, and we all show up and fish, and I get a check, and kept on going.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
I have no
Well,
clue.
I've never heard you not mention God,
Yeah,
when you get up on stage, or when you have a podcast, or and your faith is evident in your life. There are a lot of guys that talk faith, and there are a
yeah,
lot of guys that live faith. And I've seen you do both. I've seen you, talk about your faith. I've seen you live your faith, out and show it in your life. And it's just it's an awesome, testimony. And it's, to me, it's kind of sad that, we have an industry. It doesn't surprise me, but we have an industry that glosses over, our relationship with Jesus and so much. And at the same time, I've never seen a sport that where we have so many guys that are so open with their faith. I mean, it's a pretty awesome deal, to be able to, to do that and to see you live that out. So
yeah. They give us a pretty good platform, overall throughout the industry to you know to display our faith. It's pretty cool. When
yeah,
you're playing football or something, you get maybe a couple little opportunities where you could sneak it in. But
right, yeah,
got a live camera on us individually, on the bigger tours and stuff, and we can talk about it all day long. Every little thing that happens, you catch a nice one, you just say thank you, Lord,
yeah,
and that I think that resonates.
yeah, yeah. That's an awesome deal. So let's talk a little bit about fishing. Let me ask you a couple of fishing questions. So Western angling versus Eastern angling, how hard is it? I mean, I talked to Clifford Perch about this one time. Every tournament that's on the Elite Series or Major League Fishing, most of those tournaments are on the East Coast. I mean,
Correct.
it's a 40-hour drive every single time you go. And then you're competing against a bunch of guys where most of the tournaments are in their backyard. I mean, they're right there. How difficult is that to deal with, with I won't say the bias against Western anglers, but,
Yeah.
very rarely we ever go out west.
Yeah, it's very difficult. Absolutely. We don't get our turn,
Yeah.
ever. If they took like the percentage of they took the whole, like, say, Elite Series field or Bass Pro Tour field, and they said this guy lives here and here and here, and this percentage lives in the West. So this percentage lives in the West, so we should give them X amount of tournaments in a 2-year period.
Mm.
They don't do that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
exactly right.
stay
So
off the tail.
how hard was it? Do you learn? I mean, you go to, they're going to go to Gunnersville, they're going to go to Lake Fork, they're going to go to, down to St. John's, they're going to do all that stuff. I mean, how different is it, in your mind? I mean, coming from, you grew up in, Utah, which isn't
Yeah.
you don't think, I don't think first bass fishing, okay, I got to go to Utah. All right.
Oh.
But how hard was it to, to make that adjustment? How long did it take you to, you know, to to
you
work
know,
into the East Coast mindset?
it's very difficult. For one, if you don't have the time to be able to go pre-practice in this regard is very, very important, just in a navigational sense.
Mm,
And then, going out and marking structure and stuff like that take a lot of time. Some of these places you'd show up to, I've never been to. I got no idea how to get from point A to point B, you
right.
know. And I got 2, 3 days of practice or something, and half that time's just figuring out how to get around. You know what I mean? And not
Mm.
even the fishing part of it. And that's without getting time to mark areas and this and that, and it's really tough. It's really tough. If you can
That
go
is,
pre.
I mean, I grew up on Santee, and
Yeah.
I still don't like running Santee. I've grown up on my whole life, and I'm still scared to death. And I can't imagine, I guess with with navigational chips and stuff, it's a little better than when I
Yeah.
was thinking bass boats out there, when I was younger. But the yeah, that's got to be, yeah, that's one element that people don't even think about is even the navigational stuff, learning how to get from here to there and what everything's named and that's got to be hard.
Yeah, you can imagine showing up to Santee first time, got 2 days of practice, man. You know what I mean? Good luck.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
I
a
mean,
tough one.
you
That's
could
a
you could fish around the edges, you know what I mean, type of thing, and just go right down fish around the channel and kind of ease into some stuff here and there. But a lot of those good areas, you got to get back in there, and you got to
yeah.
figure out how to get in there. Yeah, just
Yeah.
take off running.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a death trap on, stuff like that. And so when you talk about the Eastern time, how different is it? I mean, how comfortable are you? I mean, I know you're comfortable now, but how comfortable were you? I guess out in the Western side, we kind of think of it as more finesse,
Yeah.
type of fishing. That isn't always the case. I was with Byron, and I think he threw a swim bait that long the whole time he was fishing at Havasu, but
Yeah.
how different is it, and how hard was it, to make that adjustment, for the power fishing versus the finesse type of deal?
As I grew up and fished more and more tournaments, I was always focused on power techniques. Um, even younger, when I was just a kid and stuff like that. And so I was always, and when I was in that, in my 20s, basically, I always wanted to learn what they call Eastern techniques, flipping, cranking, spinner baits, buzz baits, all that type of stuff. I was really into it. And I always was thinking, like, when I get to the tour level, I got to be able to, fish out there, that type of thing. So I was always like a power fisherman, even out west here. And I'd always find little places, even in a finesse lake, like, say, Lake Shasta or something. I'd figure out, I've gone up there and flipped those spotted bass out of trees,
Mm,
and I cranked them and, stuff like that. And that's kind of like a high percentage, finesse lake. And so I was always just focused more on that power type of fishing. And so, like bait wise and techniques, I kind of adapted right into fishing back east, and it created some awesome opportunities out here in the west that were, lower percentage spots, but they were high percentage. High percentage spots for me, and it would allow me to have my own little niche where I could win a tournament. And
Wow.
so,
Yeah.
like on that, on several big wins out here in the West, and but the craziest thing is now as time's progressed, Aaron Martins and a bunch of guys got out there and they showed them all about finesse and this and that, and now we got the scope, back east. Now it's like the opposite. It's like the scope works better in the east than it does in the west in general. It's so
Wow.
weird.
Wow. That is wild.
I can't really figure it out. Like there, a lot of our tournaments out here, we got guys you'd call a scoper, and this guy's not a scoper, or that type of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, but a lot of tournaments, like I would say, like 75% of the tournaments are won like not fully scoping.
Mm.
They might use it for structure, like finding a brush or a rock pile or that type of thing. But like going out there on suspended fish and scoping and that, like that doesn't happen all that often out here. It's weird.
That
I
is
don't.
wild. Yeah, I've never heard that. I hadn't thought about that. So it's a,
Yeah.
with when you talk about scoping, I know that's the hottest topic,
Yeah.
in professional bass fishing and all the bass fishing right now. But I'll tell you, I've said this many times. What my live scope has done for me is it enables me to see the fish I can't catch, and so that's exactly what it does for me. But where do you think this scoping thing's headed? Where do what's your opinion on that? Where do you think it's going to go?
I don't think that we can. I don't know. I mean, I believe, and what I think should happen is we need some type of regulation on it. We got to set a standard in this regard at some point.
Hmm.
Whether it be no scoping or whatever, or just leave it with one transducer. That's it forever. Um, but I don't know, because with the AI and everything else, I mean, we're going to get into a whole mess of stuff. It's going to, if we don't get something wrapped around on technology with that deals with fishing, it's going to be wild really quick.
You think about like I'll take it to the vaccines, and I'm not getting into the big vaccine deal, but when you introduce a vaccine, you really don't know what's going to happen 10 years
Yeah,
down the road, with
sure.
that, and we just don't know. And I think it's the same way with scoping. I imagine it's going to have some kind of impact environmentally on the sport.
Mhm.
I can't imagine that the crappie population is going to be able to sustain, the amount of pressure. Maybe they'll just get smarter and not hit anything at all, and they'll boom. I don't know, and
Yeah,
that's the big thing is we don't know. We don't know where it's going to go. Um, with the rise of the technology this far and how fast it's come onto the scene,
yeah.
I can't imagine what it's going to be like in 5, 10 years. I
No,
mean,
we're going to be tracking individual fish and be able to like have our boat follow that fish without us
wow.
even having to worry about it. I mean,
Yeah.
that you could already do that basically already today. You can have your
Wow.
boat to a fish and your boat will follow it.
Golly. I tell you, that's
Yeah,
for an old guy, and that's what I am. I'm an old guy, and I love the old ways, and I love, to the puzzle of finding fish without knowing they're there, if they're there or not, was always, intriguing to me. And at the same time, I have live scope on my boat, and so it's kind of a conundrum.
yeah. I got
Um,
the electric target. I got two transducers, so
yeah,
I got them.
yeah.
But
Well,
yeah, there
yeah.
has to
Go
be
ahead.
some type of regulation. Every sport you know has regulations on it. You can in NASCAR, baseball, football. I mean, everything.
Yeah,
Everybody's got limitations. They got
right,
everybody's running. A restrictor plate. You know what I mean?
right. Yeah,
Everybody.
that's a good illustration. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
There has to be some integrity of the sport that's left intact. It can't just turn into just all electronic stuff. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's just, it's sad to me. And I'm going to go back now. I'm going to ask you, you talked about this kind of triggered something. I mean, when you said scrounging for lures and scrounging for rods when you were younger and stuff like that, there's this big misnomer in professional bass fishing with guys that don't fish professionally that they just throw baits at you guys. They just throw rods and the baits just crawl up into your boat and you just get, unlimited things. I was talking with a buddy of mine the other day and I was in my boat and he was looking at my tackle and he said, "Man, God, that must cost a fortune." And I said, "Let me show you something." I said, I opened up my tackle box and I said, "You see this Zara spook? I got this in 1972." I've had this bait for that long, and I've kind of done that, and there's a lot of false pretenses about how professional fishermen live. That you guys have the life of Riley. There's one aspect where guys think y'all are just out there with a bobber, drinking beer and throwing down Vienna sausages every single time. But
Very.
it's a hard way to make a living.
Oh
It
yes,
really is.
absolutely. Very difficult, and like goes back to trusting in the Lord. I mean, when I started out on this journey of fishing professionally, I prayed about it a
Mm.
ton, and I just felt convicted like all the time, like go do it, you'll be fine, I got you, go, 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 and I finally went. The hawk took flight.
Oh,
And I
I
left
love
the
it.
I left the security of a job that was paying me way too much, that would let me have too much time off, and you know what I mean,
Yeah.
like the best scenario I could ever have, and I just let go and let God and took off, and it
I've
worked
heard you
out.
say that before. Let go and let God. I'm going to adopt that. Is my deal. The when guys look at professional fishermen, I hear, I talk to kids and I never try to discourage a kid because you never know when the kid's going to be the next whoever, Van Dam, whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but I do tell them, it's a difficult life.
Oh,
And
very difficult.
but I believe that you guys are called, to that lifestyle, just like a minister is called, to do that. I believe a follower of Christ is called to do what God wants them to do. And I
Yeah,
believe that there are people that are called to be professional fishermen. And so
yeah.
that's what I try to encourage, kids to do is to, seek your calling, and if that calling is to be a professional fisherman,
Hmm.
you obey that calling. And at the same time, I want to get your opinion on this. So, there's this fantasy, I call it, in professional bass fishing, that if you just spend enough time on the water, if you
Yeah,
just get out there and practice, you can throw a jig just like Andy Montgomery. You can be Kevin Van Dam. You can be Roy Hawk. I don't believe that at all. I believe it's a gift. I believe that bass fishing is a gift. I think you can get better at bass fishing, but
hmm,
I can practice foul shots all I want. I can shoot three pointers in my driveway, but I'm never going to shoot that ball like Steph Curry. At the same time, I'm never
100%.
going to I'm never going to throw a spinner bait like Kevin Van Dam. I'm never going to be able to do that because I believe it's a gift. What do you think about that?
Absolutely. I think that's a huge part of it. I think there's natural talent, especially when you get up on the top tier. I mean, those guys are born to do this. You can
Mhm.
tell.
Yeah.
It's not just because they practiced a bunch. Because I mean, obviously you have to practice a bunch, but and that's how they got their base built. But you know, you take Jacob Wheeler. You don't think he was born to fish? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You take Trey McKinney.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's wild how, but that I guess that myth is perpetrated in bass fishing. I don't know if it's to sell baits or to get
yeah,
people to buy magazines or whatever it is they want to do, but it really is a gift. And so, I would find myself in the boat with somebody. I'd fish some pro-ams early on, and I would be trying to compete with the pro. And it
yeah.
became very apparent that there was no way to do that. It was not going to happen. And so I really do believe it's a gift. I do.
It is. It is. I'm thankful to have the ability and the opportunity to do something that I love, and I thank the Lord every day, for that opportunity. And I mean, He's the one that put it in my heart. And when you have something like that in your heart and you go do it and it works out, it feels so good. And one of the worst things is to have something in your heart that the Lord's telling you to go do and you don't go do it. Whether
Mm,
that could be, like God's telling me I need to be I need to work in the post office. You know what I mean?
right.
And you're like,
Yeah.
work in the post office, that type of a thing, and you
Yeah.
end up, I don't know, when you follow the path you're supposed to be on, it, and it's the best life you could ever have. Just like you.
Mm,
You follow you he whispered in your ear and you followed.
mm.
And you've lived an amazing life.
Well,
Opportunity to do so many things and bless so many people and teach so many people, the ways of the Lord and guide them. You're a shoulder to cry on and a guidance in the dark, and you know what I mean. You're somebody
I,
that
I appreciate you saying that. You know, I had Cole Sands on my podcast recently, and he mentioned that he said, that the guy had asked him to speak at a chapel service. And he
Mhm.
said, I didn't want to do it. He said, I was no, and then he said, then I thought about Jonah. I said, you know what? I don't know if there's a fish big enough out here to swallow me, but I don't want to get into that deal. And following what God has called you to do is the most important thing, that you can do in your life. And I appreciate you. I appreciate you taking time. I know you're busy. So what's coming up for you next? What do you got going? When's your next tournament and what's happening with Roy Hawk in the future?
We got what they call the BAM series out here. We have a BAM Pro Am, and then we have the BAM Super 60. And the BAM Pro Am, I'm going to leave, I think tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow to go up there and go practice and whatnot. We have a tournament up there next week, and up at the Columbia River on the
Okay.
Washington border. I've been there in a long time, so it's going to be fun to go up there and check it out again. It's kind of like a mini version of the St. Lawrence River. Fishing's not quite as good, size wise. Number wise is comparable, but size wise, they'll every day someone will catch a 20-pound bag, that type of thing,
Now
maybe
that's a
more.
haul. I mean, that's a haul. You're getting in your truck and you're going. I mean,
It's about 17 hours.
wow. Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of driving. I know
So
what
I,
it's like to do a lot of driving. So, yeah.
so I have that one, and then 3 weeks later we go back up there for the BAM Super 60 on the same body of water. So I'm using this as kind of a practice for that one as well. That one it's a 3-day tournament and no practice at all, with
Wow.
basically a 30-day off limit. So you just show up and fish.
How do you like that? Do you like that format? I heard Andy Montgomery say one time, he said, I wish we never practiced. He said, I'd rather just go fishing. He said, I wish we just
The only
show
thing
up
I
and
don't like
go.
about it is the navigational issues.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
the, you know, I don't even know where I've shown up to some of these ones, and I don't know where the no wakes are. And
Yeah.
the first thing I asked is, "Hey, what's the penalty for running the no wakes? I'm not going to know where they're at."
Yeah.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean, every buoy I have to slow down and look at. And another guy whips right by me, and that type of thing. I think like MLF style was the best because they at least gave us a run through
Yeah. Yeah.
driver. I mean, that's
Right.
huge. If
Yeah.
you can look at it, and know the safe areas to run, and where no wake areas are, and get an idea of like some good areas to fish with your eyes, or graphing. You can graph during that too. Uh, that's huge, and at least gives us something to start with, to get going with. I really like that aspect. Without a ride through, I don't really like it, but
Yeah.
I'll do whatever
Yeah.
that what I haven't crashed yet, so.
Boy, I have. I tell you. So hey, if people want to get in touch with you, and your social media and stuff like that, how do they follow you on social media?
Yeah, it's Fish and Hawk on Instagram and Roy Hawk Fishing on Facebook. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I mean, I
Well,
have
good.
Roy Hawk one on Twitter, but most of it comes through Facebook and Instagram.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Man, I appreciate you taking the time to be with me today. Folks, if you want to follow Roy, you need to do that. I'm telling you right now, you need to get in there and you need to watch this guy. Love everything he stands for, love his character, love his integrity, love his relationship with the Lord. And this has been the Bass Chaplain Fishing Podcast. We will see you next time where faith and fishing hook up.